When we picked up the car, the owner was quite forthcoming. He said the brakes will need doing. It was an advisory on the MOT. It's pretty fitting because it's a city car, you know, a 1 litre. So a lot of stop-start driving. You find that it's quite heavy, so people use the brakes a lot and then they wear out. So we're going to whip the wheel off, have a quick look around and then replace them. Right, so we've had a good poke round the brakes, and as expected, the brake pads are pretty low on this one. It's a bit of corrosion on the discs as well, so we'll change those. But apart from that, we're all good. There's no bulgy brake pipes, nothing's ruptured. Calipers look pretty good. So all we're going to do is whip these off and put on some new brakes. So on this car, it's a standard single pot caliper, which you find on millions of cars. Now these come in 2 pieces. So you've got the actual caliper and then you've got the carrier. So to get the brake pads out, you take the caliper off, make sure it's tied up, and then to get the disc off, you have to take the carrier as well, which is bolted in at the back. To take off the caliper, you need a 7mm Allen socket. Now, these don't come in standard socket sets, you know, like the high-end ones, snap-on, things like that. You'll get one of these, but most socket sets, you don't get them. So you can buy a special tool for Fords, but it's really, all it is a 7mm Allen key. It's bolted in at the back, so we're going to pull that off first, take the pads out. That's the pads out. We're going to change them now. One of the other things that's also really important is when you're taking off a brake caliper, not to just let it dangle on the brake line, because then you might damage it. So what I like to do is just strap it up and hook it up on the suspension, just so it's out of the way. So when you're working on the other bits, you're not going to hurt anything. So the caliper's off. Now it's time for the carrier. I mean, as you can see, you can't take the disc off without it. So this, on this car, it's held on the back with 2 bolts. As with most cars, it's an 18mm socket. Pull that off and then we're about to get the disc off. So carrier bolts can be pretty tight, as you'd expect. They are holding your brakes on. So you might need a bit of leverage, or if you're not strong enough, if you're quite weak and feeble like me, time to get out of the breaker bar. Another thing that's quite important is to clean up all the surfaces before you start bolting everything together, including the carriers, the caliper, anything you can do. But especially here on the hub, because this is where your brake disc sits against, and obviously if you've got a load of grit and dirt in there, it will start to wobble. So what we do is clean all this up, clean up the caliper, push the piston back, get it all back together. Right, so here's our new disc. Another important thing to clean up while you're there is obviously they put a bit of a coating on these to stop them corroding in the box. So a bit of brake cleaner, wipe them off first before you put them on and stop it interfering with anything. Another important job, of course, is pushing in this piston on your caliper. And see, the new pads are going to be thicker than the old ones. Makes sense. So you can push these in. Now you can buy various wind back tools. They're pretty good on some cars, but for a car like this, especially on the front brakes, just big water pump pliers will do the job fine. Now the last piece of the puzzle is to lube up all the corners of your pads. Now I like to use Ceratec for this. You can use a bit of copper grease if you like. It will just basically stop them squeaking when you're working the brakes. Right, now the pads are in, they're all lubed up. We can get the caliper back down, pop it back on, we're nearly there. Right, that's the new disc, new pads, nothing's twisted up, we've put it all back together properly, so we'll do the other axle, pop the wheels back on, and then we're good to go. The only thing to remember after that is 100 miles of progressive braking, just to make sure your pads bed in properly, and then you should be good.